I see folks trickling in. I see folks are joining today. I see names coming on the side. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The time is now 1:01 Central Time, 2:01 Eastern Time. And I wanted to go ahead and say hello, happy Wednesday. And welcome to our third session of the Building a Sustainable Future for Harm Reduction Funding series. Today's session is titled Notes from the Field, Grantees, Funding, Diversity, and Sustainability. Today, it is co-moderated in partnership with NASDAQ and my lovely colleague on the Drug User Health team at NASDAQ, Amanda Muller. And for folks who don't know who I am, my name is Mark Lockwood. I'm the program manager on the harm reduction team here at AIDS United. And today we're welcomed by two lovely panelists, Nick Voiles from the Indiana Recovery Alliance and Tim Santamore from the Florida Harm Reduction Collective. We did originally have three panelists on today's panel, but unfortunately, Philomena, due to family emergencies, is unable to attend today's session. And so we wish her love and support. Next slide, please. So a little bit, just to do some contextualizing, this again is a part of the Building a Sustainable Future for Harm Reduction Funding series, which started last month and has really been an effort to help SSPs and harm reduction programs more broadly with different strategies to develop a competitive grant application and really assist programs in navigating the fraught nature of the harm reduction funding landscape. The series again started last month in partnership with NASDAQ and has operated bi-weekly from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The first one was I Want Money, Honey, Grant Writing 101, which was to assist programs with, again, how to write a successful grant proposal, the different components of a grant application and RFP, and how to sort of develop a stronger grant application. The second one was 2 weeks ago, titled What Can Data Do For You? And it was specifically on grant reporting, data monitoring, and program evaluation. That was facilitated by our colleagues at Supporting Harm Reduction Programs at the University of Washington, also known as SHARP, as well as our colleagues at NACHO. We have today's session, which you all will hear more about. And then lastly, our fourth and final one is in 2 weeks, titled Looking Forward, a Guide from Harm Reduction Funders. And there you'll hear directly from funders themselves around sort of what they're actually looking for in a grant application, as well as sort of the future of harm reduction funding more broadly. Next slide. So for today's session, our objectives really are listed here. And what I hope for you all that are attending, that this is a space for you all to learn about how SSPs and harm reduction programs more broadly have navigated the fraught nature of the harm reduction funding landscape. Secondly, I really want you all to engage in how programs have developed creative and innovative rated funding models. And then lastly, one of the things I really hope that you all get from this is to discuss strategies in leveraging harm reduction funding as a way of building a sustainable organization. Next slide. So bear in mind that today's session is recorded. So I ask that if you do not have your line muted now, to please mute your line just so that it doesn't cause distraction or frequency as the panelists are talking. Again, be advised that it is recorded, so folks will get the recording afterwards. And if there are any questions during the time of the Q&A, be sure to ask your questions, or in the meantime, while our panelists are talking, to utilize the Q&A section down below, and we'll get to those questions either while the panel's going or during our Q&A section of the session today. If you all would like now to please just introduce yourselves. I failed to do this before, but it would be great to list your name, your organization that you're a part of, and just one thing that you hope to get from today's panel in the chat now, just to sort of see who's all in attendance, what areas or jurisdictions you all are coming from, and yeah, what you all actually want to learn from today's session. If you could do that, that would be great. And so now I wanted to go ahead and introduce our lovely panelists for today. So first, on the far left of the screen, we have Nick Voiles from the Indiana Recovery Alliance. I'm going to read the bio of Nick. So Nick is the Executive Director of Indiana Recovery Alliance, the Treasurer of North Carolina Survivors Union, and on the advisory board for the National Viral Hepatitis Roundtable and the Viral Hepatitis Liaison for the Urban Survivors Union. Fueled by his experience with intravenous drug use, incarceration, homelessness, and the failing healthcare system, Nick is focused on medications for opioid use reform and viral hepatitis elimination. He is a co-author of the Methadone Manifesto, Treatment Experiences and Policy Recommendations from Methadone Patient Activists in the American Journal of Public Health. He is a proud hepatitis C and interferon survivor and has served in his community in numerous capacities, including as a crisis management coordinator. Thank you, Nick, for being here today. Next, we have Tim Santamore. Tim Santamore has been an AIDS and harm reduction activist for over 40 years, beginning in the early days of AIDS, caring for his friends and community members. In 1991, he joined ACT UP / Western New York and began advocating for syringe exchange programs in Buffalo and Rochester, New York. He was co-founder of Prevention Point Buffalo, an underground syringe distribution program, and volunteered at the first syringe exchange in New York outside of New York City, which was titled Buffalo Columbus Hospitals Project Reach. In 1992, he helped organize Buffalo United for Choice defense of women's health clinics against an onslaught of anti-choice voices. In 1994, he moved on to New York City and joined ACT UP NY's Syringe Exchange Committee, and in 1995 began volunteering on the Lower East Side's Needle Exchange Walkabout. Later that year, he served other queer activists formed Moving Equipment Queer Harm Reduction Collective to raise the voices and visibility of queer people who use drugs in the needle exchange and harm reduction movements. As a queer cis man who injected meth and used MDMA, ketamine, and other club drugs, Tim was a member of the North American Users Union and presented on issues surrounding gay men and injection drug use at several conferences, including those hosted by the Drug Policy Alliance, the North American Syringe Exchange Network, and Club Health, as well as gay men's and LGBTQIA's health summits in Boulder, Colorado. In 2000, Tim began working with DanSafe, taking over as executive director in October of 2001. When he became a director for New York State's Department of Motor Vehicles in 2003, he had to lay low for fear of being terminated for his drug use and advocacy. However, in 2018, he was able to retire and move on to Florida, where he founded St. Augustine Harm Reduction Collective, an opioid overdose program that included unauthorized distribution of syringes and other material. In 2019, he joined forces with other harm reduction advocates, sex workers, and syringe services programs to form the Florida Harm Reduction Collective, where he now serves as the director of outreach and networking. He is also a proud member of the pro-choice drag performance and activist troupe, the Church Ladies for Choice. Tim and his husband, Peter, split their time between St. Petersburg, Florida, and Asheville, North Carolina. Their dog Molly and cat Vera join them every spring and fall for their journey. And Tim is an avid reader who enjoys the occasional read. So good to have you both here. And before I go into the session, I would be remiss if I did not read anything about Philomena, who again could not join us today, but I wanted to let you all know the work that Philomena brings to harm reduction and her contribution. So Philomena Quebec belongs to the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, and she is the founder of the Bad River Needle Exchange, a tribal harm reduction program offering syringe services and overdose prevention services since 2015. The program serves Native and non-Native people in a remote and rugged area of Western Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan with life-saving access to harm reduction services. The majority of participants are Native women, a group historically underserved by harm reduction. Again, I would be remiss if I did not have Philomena here today, but welcome everybody. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the panel questions. So if you all could, I know I've read your bios, and again, so honored to be in community with you all, but I really wanted to hear you all talk a little bit more about who you are, your organization, and the scope of the work that your organization has done in the past.
Tim, I'm just honored to be here with you as well. So why don't you start out, please?
Okay. So Florida Harm Reduction Collective started, as read in 2019, and we started as a group of harm reduction, syringe services, sex worker advocates from across Florida. Really kind of what we do is a lot of support of small grassroots organizations. So bringing everybody together from across this state, talking as often as we can to support the formation of organizations, whether they be newly emergent syringe services programs that are trying to get authorization from the state of Florida. In Florida, for those of you who don't know, the process is extremely tedious and has led to really very few programs being authorized to provide services. But we also support recovery community organizations across Florida, a number of them who are doing a lot of outreach into communities, especially around opioid overdose recognition and reversal training. So that's most of the work that we do. So a few other things we have some funding for that I can talk about later.
So the Indiana, thank you, Tim. The Indiana Recovery Alliance was started in 2015 by Chris Habert and a couple others who had during 2015, the Scott County outbreak happened where 200 some odd people were infected in a tight cluster. It's one of the largest ever reported in a, I guess, related to drug, one of the largest reported in the United States, at least if not the country, in a tight cluster. And so that caused the lovely Mike Pence to pray and then decide that we could open certain services here. And we've been here doing outreach and advocacy since then. We haven't closed a day or shuttered our doors. I came to this kind of through hepatitis C. I was diagnosed and never able to be cured through the state. Tried for 7 years and they never cured me. So I walked in one day to the Indiana Recovery Alliance, and Chris and Dan Big had some medicine from another place, and they put me in touch with somebody and got me completely cured by my community. And that was so powerful that I couldn't walk away. There's nothing I could do at that point. I'd been looking for this my whole life. I pretty much thought I was alone. I didn't know all you guys were out here doing this amazing work all this time. So at this point, I'm just trying to catch up. We're still going. We're open every day. We do street outreach. We do, rapid test to cure. We do, a whole slew of drug user health hub services. I'm also part of Urban Survivors Union, which is a drug user union that really brings together the national to the local. So it's been a lot of help in me being able to organize and learn a thing or two. But yeah, so that's where I'm at now, and happy to be here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, Tim, Florida's policies and access to syringe programs is awful. Can second that. Um, so we wanted to also talk about types of funding that your organizations have received. So either from different organizations, state or federal funding. So just talking about the different types of funding that your organizations have received in the past.
I'll start this time, Jim. So 90% of all of our funding is grant funding until this year. With the advent of Hep Connect last year, or Hep Connect the previous years, had left us kind of in a dump. No one else would fund us. Well, not no one, but funding was harder to get, knowing that we had this supposed big influx of cash from Hep Connect. So what had happened is we kind of had to look elsewhere and go other places. For the first year this year, Indiana Recovery Alliance is doing a program with the state of Indiana through the Department of Mental Health and Addictions. That's real low barrier. They just give us money to do street outreach. Like it's really actually, I hate to even open my mouth and say these words, but it's a nice, easy grant to work. Hoping that it doesn't turn into something bad, So most of our funding still comes from disparate grants set all over Comer. AIDS United is a huge funder for us and has been since the beginning. There's always those three primary funders that, at least for me, since I've been here, which is HRC, but mostly AIDS United and Comer were the ones that historically raised us and allowed us, and OSF, when OSF was funding. That allowed us to be who we were in the early years and continue to allow us to grow and reach, new places. So it diversified a little bit. We didn't receive any federal funding except for kind of through some pass-throughs. Like there was a COVID pass-through grant that we got. And so that was nice. So our funding kind of diversified in that area, except for I think that's only from COVID. We don't know that will last outside. I think that was just, hopefully it's not that way. Hopefully this all turns out. But the Samson grants came out and there was nothing we didn't even go for it because it was absolutely worthless for us, at least. There was an unattainable goal that I feel like they really dropped the ball on that. But so that's how we had to diversify a little bit. We do have some new and interesting grants we've started with foundations, which is where we're hoping to push through as we go forward.
Interesting point, and really interested, Nick, on you to expound a little bit around sort of what funding looks like for you all moving forward. I'm curious with this question around, how has harm reduction grant funding allowed you to sort of expand your services, both in Indiana as well as in Florida?
Yeah, the thing about harm reduction funding, harm reduction funding is a hard, previous to me, the first year I was here, harm reduction funding was siloed, small, a couple people, it seemed like, at least for Indiana and for most of us. We all went after AIDS United. We all went after, some Comer money and OSF. I think I was here one of the last years that OSF funded. AIDS United has stepped up with the COVID grant, with a couple other funding streams. That's allowed us to grow our staff. It's allowed us to not have to go after some of the tedious little grants that are in community grants. I know you guys all have those. They're like, you do 9 miles of grant work for $7,500, and then they want to come do site visits. And then, and by the time you're done, you've done more work on that $7,500 grant than you had to do on the $50,000 grant you got from somewhere else, So, having an influx of harm reduction dedicated funding is amazing. And we're still on the cusp of that. Like these first couple of dedicated funding sources have been nice. HRC, we don't know if that's going to continue or grow to something. The Hep Connect program was great. I'm hoping that portfolio starts again or does some other work. It was good money, good deliverables, did good work. You know what I mean? Like it was same with what AIDS United is doing now with the SAF and the COVID tier 1, 2, and 3s. They're not hard reporting. They're not it's not tedious reporting. There's not tedious time taken in. It's here's the money, do the work, get it back. I understand to some people it may be, but for me at least, it's really simple. No fuss, no muss, and it's allowed us to do the work, to not be bogged down with endless deliverable every third second of the day we have to do something about it, so yeah, and in the future, it's like, I'm going to stop because I don't want to dominate this thing, because Tim probably has way better take on this than I do. But like, if we don't figure out getting larger amounts of either state, either federal, whatever that looks like, funding that also doesn't wash us away into this slew of public health, or, I don't see how we can really proliferate any more than we already are, like, and with these grants, we give too much. GIPRA is horrible to deal with. It's not for an FQHC because they've got people to do that. They've got functionaries and intermediates. We don't have those. We don't want those, So hopefully they listened to all those beautiful people that went to SAMHSA before and after that grant. They asked for our advice. We all gave our advice, and they did do one thing that we asked them to do.
About diversity of grants and where we get stuff from in Florida, before we got any grants, we started forming relationships with people we knew had money. And that was, Amanda with NASDAQ. Then you weren't with that. Where were you then, Amanda? I forget.
When I was at the state?
No, when we did this series. So the first thing that the Florida Harm Reduction Collective did, I reached out to Emma Roberts at the Harm Reduction Coalition. She put me in touch with Laura Pegram, and then we did a series of, and the collective didn't have any money to do this. We did it as volunteers, but we did a series of harm reduction webinars for people in the state of Florida, and that kind of got us known. And it got us the basis for data that we could then go out and apply for other grants for. So it was kind of a low lift for us to do, because the national organizations were fantastic in supporting it. And that kind of in-kind donation stuff is invaluable when you're starting out. But that enabled us to then sit down and actually start putting grant proposals together. We get funding from Gilead, Compass Southern Initiative. We got a transformative grant to build the network of harm reduction and syringe services programs across Florida. And that's a pretty low threshold grant. They give a lot of technical assistance around reporting grants, working with your budgets and doing your budget reports and all this sort of stuff that we all know comes. But it was an easy low threshold grant for us to get as an entree, enabling us to hire some folks and to start applying for other grants. And as Nick was saying, some of the national funders, AIDS United, the Syringe Access Fund, which has now changed its name, Comer Foundation, getting some money from them. We now have grants from the CDC Foundation. We were able to sort of, use and leverage the diverse funding we had, and sort of the limited restrictions that some of the funders have, like especially Syringe Access Fund or Comer Family Foundation. They're kind of like, tell us what you're going to do with this money. We told them what we were going to do with that money, knowing that we wanted to apply for additional grants in the future. So starting to use those unrestricted funds from low-level, low-barrier, diverse organizations to build a database that then created a narrative for us to sell ourselves to more diverse funding. So now we get money from Prevent Cancer, we get money from Borealis Foundation, we get money from CDC Foundation. And all this stuff is sort of like building our portfolio, showing that we know how to handle funds, so that we can hopefully get a contract with the state of Florida. We'll see where that's going. Funding in Florida is fraught with political division. But that's sort of been some of our strategy and where we get funding from, and looking forward to, what's going to be new. This, as Nick said, the SAMHSA $30 million, it was a disaster. 4, maybe 5 organizations that I think that the harm reduction movement can support in that. I did get a chance to speak with somebody from SAMHSA, from the audience of a conference she was presenting at. to kind of, say it was a disaster. And hopefully they fix that. And hopefully the CDC money that's coming down, whenever that comes down, it'll be fixed by that then as well. We need to advocate for that stronger.
I would add one thing, Mark, and I don't know if you're doing this, Tim, but one of the things we're really looking at is going after the opioid settlement money. Like there are, at our local levels, like this is outright. I mean, I saw some of the numbers on some of this money where like 70% goes to prevention. I mean, like we have, at least here locally, they did some finagling because Indiana thinks they're, I don't know what Indiana thinks. So they got 4.6 million for the county and for the 4.6 million for my county and for my state, or for my city and for my county, right? So we haven't even gotten the funds yet. They have no idea what they're doing with the funds. I mean, these are the politicians that I'm talking to. They have no idea what they're doing with the funds yet. So we're now trying to like speak to them and be like, listen, we need you to get us early access, push us in, and I've just been trying to bang that drum everywhere I can that if you're in harm reduction, we need to go after unilaterally this opioid settlement money. The money's based off our death, off our pain, off the stuff that happened to all of us. Like I'm great for someone to go to recovery, but like anyway, so that's what I'm really keying in on and trying to nationally get other people to key on and see where we can work the levers and what's worked in another state. And if we can push it here and if we can get some kind of semblance of like, hey, look, this is the gold standard. Opioid settlement comes in that hurt. People use drugs. People who use drugs get the money to get better, to do whatever services they need. So I just want to throw that last piece in there.
Thank you. Agreed. I'm skipping ahead one question just because it seemed related to what we were talking about. Since you had mentioned like the SAMHSA funding and just like other federal funding and it being like there's a lot of barriers in place for organizations to apply, like SSPs. What are some key things you would like advise funders of in terms of like best practices for supporting harm reduction organization and like funding them?
Best practices for foundations or for government bodies?
For funders, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, for me, best practices for funders is also, get to know the programs that are out there. Start before you put your RFP together. Know what you want to fund. Know who's eligible for that. Know who's doing work out there already in your community, and sort of be aware of that, and ask for proof of that work and proof of the relationships that organizations have. When we put in the first grant to Gilead Compass, we had 21 letters of support from organizations across the state of Florida, and it really spoke volumes, to Gilead, to Compass about the work we were doing, So, but as far as for government bodies and stuff like that, it's like, to me, a lot of that is just, you have to get out of the way of people doing the work. And by that, I mean, as few restrictions as possible, and fight back against pushback, like the whole crack pipe racist language around the SAMHSA grant that SAMHSA didn't stand up against, or that the Biden administration didn't stand up against and say, with any response whatsoever, they just caved. Get a backbone. This work is not going to be, it's easy to attack the work we do. Right wing, just say no folks can easily attack our work. So if you're a funder and you don't think that you can support our work, the work that we're doing against these attacks, then a lot of me says, don't offer us the money. Like don't treat us like SAMHSA treated us. That was very disparaging, I think, for a lot of folks in the harm reduction community, to be told that this money was going to come down, that this money was going to go to harm reduction organizations, and then for us in Florida to watch it go to 2 treatment providers, one that's been cited for excessive compensation to its executive staff, and another that says they're going to meet 7,100 people in Orlando over the life cycle of the grant. And those 7,100 people are basically people coming in for their daily MAT. So they're already providing those services for those grants. They're already getting 340B kickback money for providing services to those folks. And now they're going to get harm reduction money as well. So take a look at your funding practices, take a look at the organizations that are out there doing the work, and make sure that the money that you're giving to them goes to folks that are supported by communities of drug users, communities of sex workers, communities of people who have a history of incarceration because of the racist drug laws. That would be my 2 cents.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Like advice or tips you would give as like best practices to like funders who want to support harm reduction organizations or fund harm reduction organizations.
I would echo everything Tim just said, and really keyed in on it. Like, there's a group of people out there, they use drugs, and they perform, survival and other sex work, and they are living with HIV or Hep C, and all you have to do is ask them. It's very, very, it's not the end of the world, but like, there are people willing to do that work to meaningfully get people to meaningfully engage with funders. Like for me, at least, even here, like I spend a lot of my time talking to participants. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? What do I need? And a lot of times like, oh, you're great, and then we'll get the good one who's like, well, what if you got pipe covers that were different, or what if could you go to this place? They're really hurting. The key to all of this is the people who use drugs. Or my focus is people who use drugs. How can I empower them? How can I give them money to do what they need to do? How can I better their lives in some small way where they're just getting shit on everywhere else? How can I teach them how to talk to providers so that they sound as educated as the providers when they talk to, and know where to buck back? So I would say that, like, if you're talking about giving advice to funders, I would say make the grants easy to work, low bit, especially in harm reduction. Most of us come from lived experience. Most of us did not come off the professional track, and some of us have MPHs. I get that. Some of us have degrees in this, but most of us, we got our degree in the street, or we got it at prison, and we came out wanting to do something, and fight as hard or harder than the next guy. And I think that listening to people, both with lived experience and people who are living experience, you know what I mean, who are currently facing fentanyl's a new beast. This is not something. When I first started dope 30 fucking years ago, it was nothing like this. Now this shit is way different. You have to experience it to really get it. Like, it's a whole other thing. So, staying up on current trends, making grants really easy for people who use drugs, or for foundations to get, or for harm reduction services to get, and make sure those harm reduction services are hiring people who use drugs, hiring people who living with sex work, hiring these people that are most marginalized, going out to the camps and offering day labor. We offer a day labor here. It's called low threshold employment. Thank you, Louise. And so people come in, they work a couple hours, we pay them, and they go. We 1099 them. It's kind of a weird place. Indiana's an odd place like that. I think I could probably just give them the cash and let them walk, but I'm just trying to dot all my I's and T's, but all of those things, you could require them to do those things. Hey, where are you paying people who use drugs? How are you paying people who use drugs? Let me pay you to supervise paying people who use drugs, like that way everyone wins, And I think exactly what Tim said. I was thinking about it as Tim was talking. I was like, maybe I heard the question wrong. I don't think I can offer anything else than what Tim said, but like low threshold grants, easy reporting, making sure that you give space for people who don't wake up at 9 in the morning. Some people wake up at 12 and 1, and they're the people you want, I promise you, just stuff like, there's 1,000 little things, but I'll leave it just at what I was saying there. That helps.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting, I couldn't help myself but like snapping my fingers as you all were talking around these like strategies, right? Also just recognizing that lived experience above all is harm reduction, frankly. Um, and also I wanna think about this theme of like intention and intentionality, which you all are talking on, right? Really curious to know about how do you all sort of foster collaboration, right? And I'm thinking by collaboration, I mean, this can mean strategic partnerships, mutual aid, any type of collaborative effort. What are your thoughts around fostering collaboration when pursuing grant funding? And what does that look like for you all in your respective organizations? Or are you all doing that?
We in Florida are most certainly doing that, and you know, one of the things we did both around the AIDS United CDC SSP money, the tier 1, 2, and 3 stuff, what we did around SAMHSA, you know, when the funding announcement dropped, we get on a phone call with as many organizations as we can, and we talk about the grant. You know, you've got your grant nerds that have already read through the whole thing, and you know, so they can tell you what's allowable and what's not allowable. You know, you've got your data nerds who've gone through
Hang
and
on, Tim, with the grant nerds, hang on, Tim.
you've got your data nerds that, you know, have gone through and looked at what the data requirements are going to be. And, you know, so for something like SAMHSA, we knew, you know, we knew that was heavy. And then you've got your folks that are sort of the experts on what's going on in this state, you know, mostly, you know, the folks from the collective. But we spoke with IDEA Miami, IDEA Tampa, Sex Worker Outreach Project, and you know, for both the grants, we sort of decided who, and we've done this with other grants, who's the best organization in our network to apply for this grant, and how can we then support them? You know, and I'd say our big success it was the AIDS United COVID money, where we've got 3 tier 1 grantees in this state: Rebel Recovery, IDEA Tampa, and the collective itself, and we operate in Ocala and Jacksonville under that grant. And then we've got University of Miami, IDEA Miami, who's a tier 3 awardee, so that we're able to work with those 4 grants in a collaborative effort to like really put something powerful together. You know, so that's been sort of our success. Our success, I think, with AIDS United Syringe Access Fund and with Comer Foundation is to, you know, kind of show those organizations what we're about as a collective, show the support we have from organizations, and then, you know, use the money to support the organizations underneath us, the affiliates of the collective. You know, with some of that funding, we were able to set up a buyers club, lowering prices even for the well-funded syringe services programs to purchase syringes and things like that. You know, so we work on those collaborative efforts as well. Having a supplies warehouse. You know, we use Syringe Access Fund for a supplies warehouse, so that if any exchange runs into a bottleneck of supplies, we can hop in a car and drive them, so you know, 4,000 syringes from Orlando to Tampa one time. Ooh, it's going to thunder and lightning here. But you know, that's sort of some of the ways we've worked collaboratively.
Yeah, now I just want to have a whole segue into asking Tim a whole bunch of questions about this collective, the Buyers Club. We're working on something like that between a couple of us in Urban Survivors Union. So I will be following you up with you, Tim, about that. That's something we have long talked about here. I think what he said about the grants is the most important. The collaboration with different people in the grants, like it is pivotal that we start connecting more with the people around us. As soon as I got here, the first thing I did was start to look at all these agencies, who's doing the work. And so we have a outreach group of just the people who are doing the outreach work here. You know what I mean? Not the people who are EDing, not anybody else. This is back when I was a service manager. And we all got together and we're like, what's going on? Where's the gaps? Where's the needs? You know, how can we inform our EDs and our bosses of like what needs to happen, you know? And out of it grew this homeless coalition here that's, you know, all based on all people who are unhoused. And so as they grew, we started counting them in our grants, you know? paying them to do small things. We hired one of them, you know, like any interconnection we can. We have a great relationship with our SO here. They just like are amazing, you know. And the other thing is we have Scott County so close. So like any grant I write, like the Surrender Access Fund, I wrote in for Scott County. You know, like they hadn't yet Holding Space, which is the name of the new SSP to be in Scott County. So we wrote in money for them. You know, anything we can do to like help a smaller, you know, group that's gonna be trying to come up and give them the money. We had a group up in Indy that just wanted to teach youth who are coming in the inner cities to box, to do athletics, to do things, and on top of that, teach alternative history, the stuff that is not being taught in schools. You know, so you've got a couple professors, a couple street knuckleheads, and a couple boxers who all get together with this youth, and instead of going out on the streets and banging or doing whatever they can do, they roll into this gym and they work it out. You know, bad day, you're in the ring, you know, if you want to be, you know. And then on this side, let's talk about credit now that you're 15 and they're talking about credit. You know what I mean? Talking about opening whole life insurance, talking about all the stuff that, you know, we hardly don't see, or at least when I see it, it's only in the far right on some weird conspiracy thing, you know. But they're really, really like rocking out. And so with them, what we did is said, how do you want to get this started? And they said, well, we use sponsors, we do this. I said, no, but what I will do is I'll give you the money to go get your 501c3, and then I'll give you some more money to get started. And I don't want to ever be public about it. I'm not going to drop a name anywhere. That's it. And so that's what we did. I've never put their name in a grant. We just wanted to take the money, give it to the people who are doing it, and let them go, you know? And I think it's stuff like that. And what Tim's talking about is a dream, you know, like that's where I want to be by next year, is exactly where Tim Santamore is, because that's where it should be. That's where all our states should be. And then interacting as state collectives with each other. You know what I mean? Like if we can all figure out our state collectives, we have that power. Then we can have a national collective made up of one person from each state. And we're talking about serious freaking power, you know? So I'm just trying to get on my back burner and catch up with Tim.
That would be awesome. I support this dream.
Yeah.
I feel lucky to
come on.
You kind of touched on this, but I was just going to ask if there was anything to add about tapping into your network to strengthen your application. So I was thinking about, Tim, like when you guys were applying for the harm reduction grant or even other grants that come up, how, you know, maybe some of the ways that you guys use to decide like who would be the best organization to be the lead applicant, as an example, like some of the factors that you guys consider for those decisions.
For the SAMHSA, it was,
or for other ones that come up.
For the SAMHSA, it was a no-brainer. And, you know, we kind of heard in a lot of folks in Florida, I got, you know, messages from, hey, you know, we want to apply for SAMHSA harm reduction, you know, can you help us with that? And, you know, I had to be sort of brutally honest with a lot of folks and tell smaller organizations that I really felt that they would not be able to handle the reporting requirements and all the requirements with SAMHSA. So to have an organization like IDEA, Miami, Hansel Tukes, Tyler Bartholomew, David Forrest, Emmy Martinez step forward and kind of say, you know, we'll be the point organization. We've got the infrastructure to support this. We've got the history with reporting to SAMHSA to make sure that we remain in compliance on this grant. That was sort of a no-brainer. You know, some of the other grants that we've applied for that haven't even really been for the collective, but helping, as Nick was saying, supporting smaller organizations. Ladies Intervention Project for Success Florida, which is an emergent Black trans sex worker ex-incarcerated led organization. You know, helping them get some money to get off the ground. So writing a few small grants for them, working as their fiscal sponsor, taking care of the financial and the other reporting burden side of those grants, so that Ashante and her crew could get out there and actually do the work until we got more funding to like pay for a full-time person for them. Get their 501c3 in place, and, you know, and sort of then launch them off on their own as a financially sound and sustainable organization, but still keeping them in the collective because we learn a ton from them. You know, so that's been some of our strategies on that is, you know, looking at like what the capabilities of an organization are, seeing what assistance we can help to support them to maintain compliance with the grants that they're applying for. And then, you know, sometimes even sitting down, you know, for picking up the pieces, which is run by Michelle Pepin in Ocala. It's an unauthorized syringe exchange program. You know, actually just writing the grant for her because she has no experience in grant writing, but not necessarily writing it for her, but writing it with her. So listening to her vision for her organization and putting that into that lovely grant language that we all know we have to use. You know, in that way, she learns as well. And we've done a couple other collaborative grant processes. One was strategic planning. We got some money to do strategic planning for the collective itself, but we invited all the affiliates across the state to participate in that process. They didn't have to contribute anything to it if they didn't have anything to contribute, but at least we got them through the process. They could see what it looked like so that when the time came for them to go through strategic planning, it wasn't something that was new to them. They'd already heard a lot of the terms and a lot of the tactics. So some of the times we look for grants to do things like that. We have one that we'll be announcing at the Southern Harm Reduction Conference that we got to do work with organizations in the South around organizational toolkit building. So it's like looking for those sort of grants. If I lose power, I don't know what's going on. The lights just flashed. You know, but those have been the strategies we've looking at, you know, looking at what the strengths and weaknesses for organizations and then amplifying the strengths and filling the gaps where there are weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. I'm really loving the flow of this conversation and just again saying thank you all for your insight and knowledge. And because of that, I'm really, again, going back to a previous conversation, Nick and Tim, that we had around, again, intentionality and what does it mean for funders to sort of co-opt the work that we do as harm reductionists as well as our communities, right? And so for me, I'm really interested in how do you all sort of address the cycle of funding colonialism, again, to borrow from Tim, a term that you used the other day. So how do you address the cycle of funding colonialism that persists when funders do not have relationships with the communities in which they're funding, therefore co-opting the work that you do, right? As well as the work of the community.
Yeah. Well, I start off a little bit by defining when we were talking previously, what I mean by funding colonialism, and it, you know, maybe it's obvious, but, you know, when an organization from outside of a community receives a grant to go into that community, provide services, take resources out of that community to write future grants to sustain their sort of like viability or their ability to write additional grants. So not paying anybody in the community that they're providing services to, and taking the data that they're getting from those community members, which actually belongs to those people. It does not belong to your organization, and using that to write additional grants to get more money. And so what we've seen happen, you know, I think over the years in harm reduction is the organizations that are capable of doing this are capable of winning you know, subsequent grants, and it sort of blocks other organizations out. I saw it happen in the AIDS movement as well, where traditional white male gay AIDS organizations know how to write a grant. They've got a grant writer on staff and on payroll, and they go after grants no matter what their relationship with providing those deliverables or those services has been in the past. They just go after that money, and then they'll opt 10% off for their indirect costs, and they pay their, you know, this other folks too to that aren't actually working in the community or from the community. So, you know, the sort of the question is like how to combat that. You know, it's like one, harm reduction has to get better at calling that out. And I think that the response to the SAMHSA grants is a beginning of that. Calling out SAMHSA on, you know, the funding colonialism that's going to be going on in the panhandle of Florida, where the organization that got the SAMHSA grant is already reaching out to an indigenous Emerald Coast Life Center, which is an indigenous woman-run recovery community organization and opioid prevention outreach program. And they're asking her to help, and they're offering her like $150 to put together some webinars for them. And it's like, you know, it's just appalling, you know, and being able to say to these organizations, or have funders say to these organizations, you know, that's not what we funded you to do. We didn't fund you to like suck resources out of the indigenous community in the panhandle so that you could write another grant. You know, that it's sort of appalling that it goes on, and that some of these larger organizations just feel that they need to suck up all the money in the atmosphere. You know, let a diversity of programs, you know, get up and running, and you'll find that there is far much less siloing, that there are far better array of services available to people in your community. And you know, back off, sit down and support those organizations.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of that here. We have we have some states that are close to us that are really have some organizations moving in. We also have a lot of what I like to call this these political what would I call it? Like a political organizing group. They want to organize in our state and get people riled up. And before they were just doing like, you know, some work around natural disasters in Indiana, you know, trying to get people better voting rights, stuff like that. And then recently they've stepped into treatment, or they stepped into the overdose crisis and stuff. And so like they, you know, talk about setting up certain services places, and they've never experienced either drug use or running a certain service program. Not asking, just doing, just bulldozing into it, going for the money and grabbing it. And that's the kind of push we see. Like, you know, it's more like people who want to open up organizations here under the guise of helping all of us that are people who use drugs or people with lived experience, and then the money just goes to them. It's not going to help any harm reduction services, and they're not asking harm, not that they have to, not that it's siloed into this, but like there are these people who've been doing the work in these places forever, and they come in and they start with no lived experience, just bulldozing through, you know, and they do these call banks, and they do these visits to churches, and they do all these things where, I mean, God, it's like a pusher. It's like a, you know, it's like I'm getting pushed the drug of whatever company this is, you know? And I think it's also a huge thing we're seeing in other places where these conglomerates that are FQHCs or have just become FQHCs are just eating up these small places. You know, if you look in West Virginia, what happened there was the Senate Bill 334. What did it lose? Like 18 SSPs? You know, I mean, I think we really have to look at like both the political and also, excuse me, and also look at the political problems we're having. You know, I hope that answers your question. I almost segued real hard. And
yeah, no, it did.
It
did. And I think what you all are sort of pointing out, again, this idea of like intention and power, right? And also to Sue's point in the chat around cultural genocide, right? And how it is alive and well. And what does that mean? When, like thinking about that alongside the impacts of what does that do for our programs and the communities by which we care about, right? I'll throw it back over to Amanda. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you guys. So I wanted to go back to, and Tim, you had kind of mentioned this just like with SAMHSA grants that come up and stuff and conversations you've had with other folks interested in applying for grants. How do you guys decide, and like what factors do you use to decide if you're going to apply for a grant that comes out? Obviously, you know, things about infrastructure, reporting requirements, all of, you know, how much money they're actually giving for the work. So just wanted some insight that you guys use to decide which funding opportunities to actually apply for.
We also look as, back to the sort of the funding colonialism thing. Like, are we actually doing the work? Like, is this something that's in our vision and in our mission? Or are we just looking at a grant to keep the doors open? And so I sort of understand that. I do understand that sort of need of organizations to just, keep throwing grant applications against the wall to see what sticks, to keep open. But then what do you do when you actually get a grant that's got deliverables that you're not familiar with? So that's certainly one of the things we look for. We also sort of, in determining what grants we want to apply for, we have a community advisory board that's made up of people who use drugs, family members who've lost loved ones to an opioid overdose or into incarceration, folks with lived history in sex work, or folks who are doing sex work. And we've kind of listened to them for what grants that we should be going for as well. It's listening to our community, what they want. That was like the basis for the HIV self-test grant we got from the CDC Foundation, is we heard that our street outreach workers really wanted to provide HIV oral tests to their participants. We knew they had the capacity to do it. We saw the data that they were giving us. It was good data demographic wise. So it wasn't going to be a heavy lift when we got that grant. The hardest part has been getting the HIV oral test from the state of Florida, but that actually turned out not to be a problem at all. That was, I would say, our biggest worry. But Florida kicked right in. They're looking to expand oral test numbers as well. So that's some of the things that we look at. Capacity, ability. Is it for us? The Florida Harm Reduction Collective, we have sex worker organizations in our organization, but the organization is not run by folks with a history of sex work. So we're not going to apply for a grant from one of the sex worker orgs to support the infrastructure of the collective. Will we apply for one to support LIPS in Tampa? Sure thing, but that money is going to go to LIPS. It's not going to go to us.
I'll say one thing before I have to get off here. Do you want to repeat the question again? No, I'm just kidding. The idea. I mean, you can't. I get listening to Tim, man, and I just I just want to. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna have to nail down Tim for a couple of things. I'm newer here.
I'll be at the bar in Puerto Rico.
All right. What about Southern? I need it now. I mean, just a brief thing before I have to. I'm sorry that I had this 3 o'clock. I wish there was something else I could do, but it's one of those things. The idea of all of this whole umbrella that we're in with this harm reduction funding, we have a chance here to really push this envelope. We have people like Tim. We have people like Louise, like Shiloh, like Mark, like Christina, all the people on every code. We have all these great people. As soon as Mark died, something happened to me, and I thought, we are losing. We are losing these stories. We are like just hearing Tim's story. Like, we are losing all of this history that we have. If we don't very fast get our history, and look at what Maya Salvitz had to do just to get her book written. She said she left out 80% of the stories she wanted to include. And these are warriors. I mean, these are people. Without ACT UP, we would not be here. We would not have syringe services without Tim and ACT UP, period. Or Daniel Raymond, or any of these people that are out there, I mean, what would we have without Mona in the South? Thinking of all of that, intentionally moving forward, denying these SAMHSA grants. I wanted to boycott the grant. When the grant came out, I thought, let's face front say, no, we're not taking that money. Fuck you. We told you what to do with the money. Come back when y'all can give us the type of money we need to. And $30 million, thanks for the change you dropped on the floor. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't do it. I wasn't in a space to do it, but if I had enough power, we could, And I just think that there's a point now where we're starting to create larger connections with everybody, you know, and Zoom has done one thing, you know, I hate it. It's allowed us to reach out a little bit more than we did before, you know, and all of us could take a piece from that, go after this opioid money, start to say no to these grants and fight back against this money, this $2 change they're trying to drop in our freaking pockets, and then make us work like a dog just to get it. You know, I'm not set up for GIPRA, you know, like anyways, I think that's what we need out of harm reduction funding, and more dedicated people like AIDS United to carry us through until it gets there. You know, more funding from you guys. When we're talking about a pass through, get Samson to give it through you guys in HRC. We trust and know you guys. You know, let's start writing up a huge letter, you know, and be like, we're not going to accept the fucking money. Let's for once say, you know, you're not going to drop that money through AIDS United, through HRC, or through NASDAQ. We don't want it, you know, or give it to CDC. You guys obviously don't know what you're doing, you know? And so, I mean, I hate to be so radical about it, but I just like, everyone keeps saying, well, we'll change here and we'll fit this and we'll go after this policy. And none of it's working, you know? So some good old fashioned activism, maybe, you know, I don't know. But thank you for having me, you guys. And it was absolutely a pleasure.
No, thank you, Nick. I know that you have to drop off, but thank you so much for your love, your labor, and your wisdom. And I'm so honored to be in community with you. Thank you.
Me too. You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
I know that we have a few more questions left, folks. For folks that are still on the call, that does not mean drop off. So we're gonna grill Tim. So we've talked a lot about, again, funding colonialism, intentionality, strategic partnerships, and mutual aid, right? All as it pertains to receiving grant funding, right? But we have not talked about what happens if you don't get the funding by which you've applied for. So any sort of like advice that you want to offer up to programs around what are the next steps for if you don't get funding, and how do you plan for that as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's I think the biggest disappointment of the SAMHSA grant is all the wonderful ideas that I know harm reduction organizations had for spending the money, innovative ideas that really would have informed, you know, future spending and best practices and strategies for actually like maybe ending the nightmare that's been going on in communities, you know, for over 100 years around the drug war and the racism of it. You know, when you don't get the money, it certainly is disparaging. You know, the first thing we were just asked to put in a fairly large budget to an organization. And then, you know, on a Sunday afternoon, I got a phone call to resubmit that budget, pulling almost everything out of it, you know, and we had got kind of excited about, hey, we're going to be able to do all this work in Florida with that money. And then just to get told, no, we're not going to get paid to do that work. And, you know, for us, and I think for a lot of grassroots organizations, and this is something for funders to understand, is that we're going to do this work anyway. Like, these are our people. I can't leave behind people who use drugs and sex workers in the work I do. And I'm lucky enough to not need an income because I retired from the state. But, you know, funders should know that we're likely going to do that work, continue to do that work. And if you're in a position where you can, where you're seeing monies that's available, maybe reaching back out to those organizations that you've had to deny and letting them know of other funding streams that may be available to them. You know, I know that some organizations in Florida around have been shut down because we said we were going to spend some money on some state money on outreach materials, and the state told us that you couldn't do that because they couldn't be assured that we weren't going to buy drug paraphernalia with it, you know. So we kind of got shut down on that funding, but then you know, which that comes to a whole other thing of not getting funding, why you didn't get funding, and funders understanding that some of us can't apply for funding because we are doing things that aren't technically legal. You know, they work in gray areas, you know, but I think more to the question, you know, is like, don't get disparaged. because you don't get funding. Look at your grant application. Hopefully you've gotten some good suggestions back from it. Retool your grant applications. It's not for naught. There's going to be another funding cycle coming up. You know, just keep your chins up. I mean, a lot of us have been funding this work on, as Dave Purchase used to say, on t-shirt sales. You know, that's how we've been providing syringes to people for decades. So.
Yeah, and I, in previous webinars we did for this series as well, because you had just mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that would have been a really good thing to include in the first webinar we did for this series under like tips and stuff, is if you're able, if you didn't get funding that you applied for, and if you're able to request like the scoring of your application from the funder and see if they have any feedback, so that you can see, you know, where you might have missed points on an application and improve it, you know, moving forward for if you were planning to apply for funding with them in the future, is just, yeah, something I think might be helpful. So I think we're just going to do one more question and then move into Q&A. So we've talked a lot about this, just in terms of things we would like to see funders do. I mean, putting stuff through pass-through organizations is a huge one, I think, because we can come up with a lot of ideas to like improve a process at SAMHSA and CDC, but like the truth is they are such large organizations with a lot of bureaucracy. It is very hard and like takes a very long time to, I think, see a lot of real change when it comes to like improving an entire funding application process or something. So putting things through pass-through organizations that have better relationships with SSPs, having low barrier, you know, funding applications, easy reporting, but kind of just wanted to see if there was anything else to add on what you hope for in the future for harm reduction funding.
Yeah. Well, for a lot of the organizations, you know, and this again mostly goes probably to federal organizations, is that, you know, in Florida and in many states we have restrictions around what we can do with funding. For instance, Florida, you're not allowed to spend state, county, or municipal dollars on syringe services programs. Nobody's quite sure what that means. Is it just the syringes, or is it all the wraparound services or such? You know, but for federal organizations to bypass state bodies with those restrictions, you know, whether ONDCP, SAMHSA, or CDC, you know, they're going to come up with an agenda and sort of a, you know, what they want to see, the policy work that they want to see done, or the services that they want to see provided. You know, they have a vision for that, and their vision can be wonderful. But if the state decides that for some political reason they're going to block funding for those projects, then the agendas of the administration and the organizations aren't going to work out either. You know, so by giving money directly to organizations, to harm reduction organizations, you know, we can do that work. We can get that work done around them, but we can also provide back sort of what I think gets lost in SAMHSA and CDC is the narrative around, you know, what's being done with the money. You don't see SAMHSA and CDC doing phone calls like this. You know, they're not, the organizations that are getting funding are not giving back to the broader community. They stay insular, and they want to use that data only for themselves so that they can leverage it for another grant. So by giving it to the Harm Reduction Coalition, NASDAD, AIDS United, Drug Policy Alliance, you're going to get much more bang for your buck. You're actually going to get workable solutions, and you're going to get the sharing of those workable solutions by people who aren't proprietary. We don't own the work we do. We share the work we do because it's going to help our community in other parts of the country or other parts of the world.
Ooh, and the mic is dropped. Again, I just want to say thank you, Tim, for being here, and again, also sharing wisdom and knowledge. We're going to go over into transition over into question and answer Q&A. For folks, if you'd like, you can use the chat box if you want. You can also use the Q&A section if you'd like as well for questions for Tim. We do have one question that was submitted from an anonymous attendee that said, for people with limited staff, how do you recommend you divide your time between advocacy, funding, and services?
Wow. Yeah, you always end up working 120 hours a week when you have limited staff, don't you? You know, it's hard. That's a hard question, and I honestly don't know that I've been able to figure it out. You know, I'm supposed to be retired. I probably put in 60 hours a week working for the collective. It's something I love. It's a passion that I have. You know, but you've got it. The thing that I'll say is to not forget is, you know, making sure you're complying with those deliverables, you know, and that's, I think, the hard part for, I know it's the hard part for some of our affiliates, you know, the data collection that is required, the data entry that's required, you know, making sure you're not missing that. You know, some of that can be, you can try to get volunteers and stuff to do it, but that's like the important stuff that's going to enable you to apply for more grants later on. Yeah, how do you balance that? Yeah, that's a dang good question, because, you know, for me, the desire was always to go out on the street and do outreach work. You know, but I knew I couldn't do that. I knew I had to keep the books. I knew I had to make sure payroll was submitted. I knew I had to. So that is a difficult one.
Are there any, thank you, Tim. Are there any other questions from our participants or attendees today? For Tim? Again, feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A tab down below. And also, no question is a silly question. There was no, someone just said, Tim, that it was just so much, so much gratitude for this space and the wisdom shared. We love affirmations as well. Absolutely. And I would agree with that, Logan. We have another question here, Tim, from Jennifer Swanson, said, so many of our grants are reimbursement based. What do you get those upfront to start out? What do you do to get those upfront funds to start out? My apologies.
Yeah, so that's, you know, and this is something I know too that some funders look at, and, you know, that's, do you actually have any money in reserve? You know, and setting aside money for reserve is again something that's very difficult in a movement where funding is so hard to come by and so restricted. But we try to put together a portion of each of our grants that we're allowed indirect costs on to support, you know, as a reserve fund. We try to do a lot of fundraising of unrestricted money around the work we do as well. You know, whether it be, jokingly I say it, but t-shirt sales, or, you know, just Facebook fundraisers or GoFundMe fundraisers that go into our reserve fund, so that when we get a grant, you know, and recently one of the grants we got commenced on June 1st. They wanted us doing work on June 1st. We didn't get a check until June 23rd. You know, how do you do that? Well, we were able to dip into our reserve funds and pay for the work that we needed to do until the funding actually came in. And then working on an accrual basis with our accountant, we were able to track what those costs were until the money came in, and then pay back the money from the grant into our reserve fund once that came in. So documenting the work that you're doing that is reimbursable, even though you don't have money coming, you know, and hopefully with a little bit of reserve fund and financial planning, you can hold out for that. And there are a lot of little grants out there that come with, you know, with unrestricted funding. Third Wave, really good funder for small, quick, fast action stuff that may keep you afloat until you're actually able to submit an invoice. And to funders, yeah, it says 30 days payable on your invoices, and we get that. We get that it's going to take time, but making sure, again, this is knowing the organizations that you're funding and making that 30 days as few days as possible, helps for small grassroots harm reduction organizations to kind of keep people fed, to keep our staff from having to do other work to supplement their income until we get the reimbursable money.
Mhm, mhm. We have more questions here, Tim. Hang on just a second. And also another affirmation from Mary Pounder. Good to see you on the call, Mary. Grateful to Tim, Nick, and all programs leading in best practice and taking care of community. The two questions that we got in the chat or in the Q&A section said from Danielle Jones saying, "Hi, I'm DJ. Is canvassing an acceptable means of raising money?"
By canvassing, I'm not sure what you mean, DJ.
We'll wait for DJ to clarify what they mean by canvassing. And then another question said,
I'm old school harm reduction, old school activist. However you get money is how you get money. I mean, if canvassing means shaking down people on the street, sure. Set up a table, put out a can, and have some flyers about the work you do and ask people to donate for it. And one of the things that I've seen that really is, I think, worked well that way in raising money is Homeless Youth Alliance and Mary House program. How they sort of, folks who they're looking to get donations from, they kind of indicate what those donations would buy. $10 will buy 2 dozen pair of socks. $50 will buy this, that. Let those folks that you're asking for small donations from know what the money that they're giving is going to go for. And I think, you can start to raise some of those funds to do the work you're doing until the reimbursable money comes in.
And I would echo that as well. One of the things that they mentioned in the Q&A, Tim, was this was like door to door, street corner.
Yeah.
So yes, and then another question that we got was, outside of state, federal, or other grant funding, what are other ideas for funding? Merchandise, TA, these are examples that they're asking. So is it merchandising? Is it TA? Is it charging for trainings?
Yeah, I mean, on the TA and the training and stuff like that, take a look around and like before people start coming to you and asking you to do it, have an idea of how much you would like to get paid for that. Someone coming to you and asking for technical assistance or training in an overdose reversal class or something, a lot of organizations have money to do that, and you can do that sliding scale. You can say for a mutual aid Food Not Bombs organization, you're not going to charge them anything. But if a treatment center comes to you and wants best practices in outreach to prevent opioid overdoses, they should be paying you, and paying you well for that. That's something that their institution is going to incorporate into their practices, and if they're going to mention it in their funding their grants later on. So do that ahead of time, so that you have a response when you get something from an organization to say, hey, we'd like you to come do a training, and pay yourselves well. Don't let folks discount your pay and say $15 an hour or $20 an hour. Putting together a training or technical assistance or participating in somebody's technical assistance program takes much more than just being on the call for an hour and a half. So make sure that you're getting paid to do the work, and whether they pay you directly or pay your organization. A lot of them are more comfortable with paying organizations. I found, especially in Florida, they'd rather our 501c3 letter and our EIN number, and they pay us the check. But don't be afraid to tell these folks that your time is worth money, and because it is, and you know, it'll come. You'll get some money. And again, it's funding that basically you've already given the deliverable. So, you know, you can do with it much like what you want.
Thanks, Tim. We had a hand raised from Andrew Hoffman in the attendees thing. And so I'm gonna hit the button to allow Andrew to talk if Andrew still has a question. Hi, Andrew. I see that Andrew Hoffman still has their hand raised. So Andrew. Oh, I guess not. Okay, are there any other questions from any other attendees on the call? Oh, I see that that was an accident. It's okay, Andrew. Are there any other questions for Tim on the call? I'm gonna check the Q&A. I don't see any other questions. And that is totally fine. If there are no further questions, Annie, this is where I need you to pull up the next slide. Annie should be pulling up our slide shortly with the contact information. But other than that, I wanted to say thank you all for attending today's webinar. Listed on the screen shortly will be contact information for everyone that was here today, including Philomena, who unfortunately, again, was not able to attend. This will again be going out to all of the attendees here and for folks who registered for the series writ large. In that follow-up email, so you all will be getting a follow-up email tomorrow. And in that follow-up email will include an evaluation. So just feedback on today's session. And just for future programming, you'll receive a recording and a link to YouTube of this recording, as well as any other additional resources that we can really help, build the sustainability of harm reduction programs. And then lastly, in that email will be a registration link for our final webinar, which is on August 3rd. Again, it's titled Looking Forward, a Guide from Harm Reduction Funders. And it's going to explore how SSPs can develop a competitive, well-developed grant application. This session will also highlight the current federal and nonprofit funding trends to assist programs in navigating the harm reduction funding landscape. And participants will hear directly from funders on how to capture evaluation criteria, key aspects of an RFP, strategies to diversify nonprofit funding, and how to build a sustainable future for harm reduction funding. On that panel would be Mary Pounder from the Comer Foundation, Emma Roberts from the National Harm Reduction Coalition, Sharday Lewis from NASDAD on Drug User Health Team, and then last but not least, Christine Rodriguez here at AIDS United on the harm reduction team. We look forward to seeing you on August 3rd. Thank you so much, Tim, for your, again, just knowledge, expertise, and wisdom. Thank you, Amanda, for being a lovely co-moderator. And thanks to both Philomena and Nick, who were here today as well. Thank y'all. Y'all have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Take care.